What if I told you you can turn wood on your table saw? No actual lathe required. In this video, I'm gonna show you how to take a blank like this and use some scraps and your common table saw to turn it into this. This video is my version of the table saw lathe. I'm building this entire sled out of 3/4 inch plywood, so I raided my plywood cart for scraps. I love this thing. If you haven't seen my build video for it, check it out, especially if you're drowning in offcuts like I always am. While I'm cutting out these parts, let me tell you why I'm building this. I've got a project coming up that needs 3-inch diameter white oak dowels for furniture legs. I don't have a lathe, so I wanted to buy them, but they're basically unicorns. I looked everywhere, can't find them. I'd already designed the whole project and I was attached to the legs, so I started researching how to make my own cylindrical dowels without a lathe. That's when I found Izzy Swan's video on building a table saw lathe. It blew my mind. I fell down the rabbit hole and I watched every other build video that I could find of their versions, and I decided, yep, I'm also building this. So this is my take on the concept. I pulled inspiration from a few different designs and I created a version that works for me. If you want to build this one too, I've got build plans linked below for my version with a full cut list, materials, and step-by-step instructions. First up, grooves on both side panels. I'm using my plunge router with the universal router jig from 3x3 Custom. This jig is awesome, and it helps with a ton of special cuts, including perfectly straight grooves. I'm using one of the included edge guides to keep the bit aligned. This is a 1/4 inch bit, so I'm following the golden rule, no deeper than 1/4 inch deep per pass. I lower the bit each time until I cut clean through. The opposite side board has a mirrored groove. For this, I just traced the first groove onto the second board with them lined up. Easy. Then I cut it out the same way. On the second board, I got smart and set clamps as stop blocks. Next, I'm cutting a large rectangular hole in the sled bottom for the best dust collection. I used my track saw for the straight edges and then finished off the cut with my jigsaw. Okay, here's everything laid out: bottom, sides, rails, and bearing blocks. If you're building along, the build plans will walk you through every measurement. Okay, now let's prep for assembly. Since we're into a woodworking project today, it's the perfect time for me to tell you about today's video sponsor, Woodworkers Guild of America, which is my go-to online resource for woodworking ideas, instruction, and info. Their premium library is stacked from table saw techniques, jigs and fixtures, lathe turning, joinery, shop projects, and so much more. I personally pulled a lot of inspiration for this sled that I'm building from their jigs and fixtures and table saw sections, and I'm eyeing the furniture building section next. The best part, these are expert taught step-by-step videos with downloadable resources. Super clear, easy to follow, and they're always adding new premium videos, so you've got fresh ideas for your next build. You can also join live stream Q&As, ask questions, and connect with other woodworkers. You guys know there's nothing like creating something one of a kind with your own hands. The first 1,000 of you to click the link down in the description are gonna get a full year of premium membership to Woodworkers Guild of America for only $1.49. So if you want to level up your woodworking, click the link below or scan this QR code and join the Woodworkers Guild of America today. I glued the rails to the inside of the side panels. The glue does all the heavy lifting here. I just added a few brad nails to hold everything while it dries. Make sure to clean up any glue squeeze out so it doesn't mess with the center supports sliding later. Next, I laminated 4 thinner boards into 2 thicker boards. These will become the bearing blocks. I clamped them up to dry and then gave them a quick cleanup pass on the table saw to knock off the dried glue. Both of the bearing blocks need 2 opposing recesses for the bearings. I'm cutting them with a 7/8 inch Forstner bit on my drill press, but a handheld drill works just fine too. To set the depth, I lowered the bit until the shaft shoulder touches the surface. And then I placed one of the bearings I'm using under the depth stop on the side, and then adjusted the collar down until it just touches the bearing. Now the recess depth for the bearing is dialed in perfectly. To perfectly align the front and the back recesses, I swapped to a small drill bit and then drilled through the center all the way to the other side. I then flipped it and used that small hole as my guide and cut the second recess from the back. And finally, I drilled the center hole all the way through for the 3/8 inch threaded rod. And then repeated everything for the second block, which gets the same holes and bearings. One of the bearing blocks needs notches on each side so it can slide along the rails. And I cut those with multiple passes on the table saw using a crosscut sled. And when the lathe is fully assembled, this part will slide along the rails like this. I cut the threaded rod to length with a hacksaw and a good bimetal blade. When I was finished, I spun a nut down the threads to clean up the burrs and reform the threading. I then pressed in the bearings, slid the rod through, added 2 jam nuts on one side to lock it in, and then secured a single nut on the inside. These are T-nuts and they're going to hold the locking knobs. I set the sliding block in place and marked where the grooves line up with the side panels. I then drilled a shallow recess, drilled the center hole, and hammered the T-nut in. Now it's smooth and clean, and most importantly, flush with the outside. Okay, I was on autopilot and I accidentally cut notches in both bearing blocks when only one needed them, but I patched them. Quick and dirty plugs glued into place, not at all perfect, but totally good enough for a shop jig. All right, let's put this thing together. I pre-drilled countersunk holes in the sled bottom, added glue, and secured the side panels. Countersinking is key here so the bottom stays flush and slides smoothly over the table. Next, I secured the front bearing block with glue and a couple of screws on the side, making sure it was totally square. And then the backboard the same way. I then set the middle sliding block into place, set the side panel into position, tilted the sled over and marked the side panel's location on the bottom. Added glue to the side panel and then screwed in the panel from underneath, same countersink process. Once the middle block is positioned, these threaded knobs lock it down. I cut the runners from plywood. It's stable, it resists warping and movement, and I've got tons on hand. Okay, I set the sled on the table saw, centered the bearings right over the blade, and used the fence to lock it into position. I temporarily raised the runners proud of the table by placing nuts underneath them in the miter slots. I added glue to the top of the runners and then lowered the sled onto the runners using hot glue to hold position. And then I screwed the runners to the sled using countersunk holes. Okay, last step, the lid. This helps with dust control and honestly, it just makes me feel safer. I cut a strip from 1/2 inch plywood and then swapped in a blade on my table saw designed for cutting plastic. This lid is 1/4 inch plexiglass. Once the protective film comes off, it's crystal clear. I drilled countersunk pilot holes, screwed the plexiglass to the wood strip, and then attached it to the sled with a piano hinge. And there you go, a clean, smooth operating safety lid. Okay, time to test this thing. I'd already glued up some white oak scraps to make a solid test blank. I then found the center points on each end, marked them with an awl, and then drilled 3/8 inch holes into the ends. Probably not necessary, but to help things along, I first knocked off the corners with some bevel cuts. I then swapped in a flat top blade for my table saw. From everything I've watched, this style blade gives the best results for table saw lathe cutting. And by the way, I pulled out the zero clearance insert to maximize dust collection. Okay, here we go. The threaded rod is powered by a nut driver and a drill which spins the blank. I started by partially threading on one side, then I moved to the opposite end to check alignment and thread it in fully. Okay, first pass. I slowly raised the blade and made several shallow passes, especially on this first run, just to feel things out and make sure everything was working smoothly and safely. So far so good. The edges are coming down and I'm getting that nice even rotation. Now let's raise the blade a bit more. And now you can really see the cylinder taking shape. This is so cool. The whole setup feels solid and safe. And honestly, there's hardly any drag through the drill. That really surprised me. The cut feels really controlled. Also, I'm so glad I added that lid. If nothing else, it's keeping the dust and the bigger chips contained, and I like a clean workspace. Okay, almost there. Most of the blank is fully round and there's just one flat spot left. Before going further, I paused to just double check everything. Bolts are still tight, bearings are spinning cleanly, all good. Time for pass 3. And that'll do it. It worked. And here's a nice bonus. I can use the drill to rotate the wood and sand it evenly. Just hold some sandpaper and let it spin. Super smooth finish with barely any effort. Wow. That is so cool. I love it. I'm super happy and I'm super impressed. I was a little nervous just because of what it is, but it didn't feel dangerous at all and it worked perfectly. I don't even see any saw marks on the surface, and coming right off of the lathe with minimal sanding, it's practically ready. So to know that I can now turn parts in my small shop without having to have a lathe is so exciting, and I'm stoked to show you what I'm gonna build with this. Let me know what you think down below. Don't forget I have build plans linked, and thank you so much for watching.